Howdy, folks. John Ebbs with Seeking Light. Again, just seems like YouTube wants to cut off the beginning of my videos. Anyway, you can see in the title that is a direct quote of the title of a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Sorry, I got very little sleep last night. New England Journal of Medicine. It was actually published last year, but it's coming to light more recently. This was a study done by Israel. So Israel, they've been more honest in terms of their studies when it comes to COVID. They, excuse me, have also provided more useful data. And what I mean by data is their study cohorts have, one, been tremendously large. So the study that I cited in the title has in the millions of study participants. In the millions. Now, I look at a lot of research for my current job. It's part of what I do. A lot of the studies, they may have a few hundred participants, but I've also had single case studies that I've reviewed. I've had study participation of maybe 50 participants. And even at the 50 participant level, if a study is done well, if it follows a certain format, it's considered a pretty good study and it's useful to what I have to do. But when you have study participation of numbers in the millions, well, that's good data. Now, this was a prospective study looking back at the results of two different things. One, waning efficacy of being immune to infection for those that had never been infected but had one or two shots of the vaccine versus those with previous infections but no shots. Now, what was found was something that we would expect, that immune response was waning in both groups. So either you got the shots without previous infection, but over a course of time you lost the effectiveness of your protection, or you had a previous infection of SARS-CoV2, and it turns out that your immunity would wane as well. Well, the study was pretty conclusive that those who had natural immunity had better and longer lasting protection than those with two shots. I can say that because all I'm doing is citing a study. Check it out. There's a lot of data in this study. And like I said, the N or study group was tremendously large. Now, some might take exception with this kind of retrospective study where they're looking at data, they're analyzing data that is older. So that, let's say today in 2023, they're now looking at 2020 or 2021 data. 2021 data is what they looked at in this study. So they're looking at Delta variant infections. You know, the Delta one was one that a lot of people were really concerned about. And it caused a lot of problems here in the United States. But but when you have such a large cohort, I just watched a guy go the wrong way down a road. I hope it doesn't cause this. But when you have such a large study cohort, the study format becomes less relevant. Sorry, thoughts are forming a little bit slowly, but I've got them in my head. Just articulating them is the challenge right now. But when you have a situation where, let's say you're doing a survey, surveys are very weak study format. You're doing a survey and you survey 10 people. and they give you the data that you are looking for, and then you write a study based on 10 people. But the information that you've gleaned from these 10 people, actually, you're trying to pertain it to millions. Well, that's not going to fly because your cohort, your study group is way too small. But now let's say you've got a study group which contains millions of people that you've collected data on, and you're applying it to tens of millions. Well, you're probably pretty conclusive in your study results, and you could probably make some pretty good predictive models and assumptions based on the data that you've gotten. It's probably rock solid at that point. And that's what's going on with Israel. One of the things to note about Israel is can't remember exactly the year. It might have been 2019, might have been 2020, but Israel also collected a lot of data around a drug that was largely panned by the media as being simply a horse deworming medication. You might remember which one I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it. Actually, I've said enough in this video that's probably going to get it tagged by YouTube. So I'll just say it, ivermectin. So you might remember that ivermectin was largely panned by the media as being horse dewormer. And they were saying, don't take horse dewormer to prevent or improve your condition after contracting SARS-CoV2. It's not effective. What they failed to do in those news reports is indicate that ivermectin has since the 1970s been recognized as an effective antiparasitic medication, and starting somewhere, I think it was the 1980s or 1990s, was found to have a strong antiviral capability and studied well before the pandemic. And what the Israel study found at that point was again, very large cohorts. We're talking thousands in this case of people treated with ivermectin, and they had excellent efficacy. It was something like 73% reduced infection rate and hospitalizations. So Israel comes out with these studies, which involve huge amounts of people. They obviously have some kind of enhanced public data collection going on for healthcare that we don't utilize in the United States, at least not to the effectiveness of them. And what has it shown? Well, the previous study I was just mentioning, the ivermectin one, showed conclusively that an over-the-counter, extremely cheap, well, it's not over-the-counter, you need a prescription to get the human version, but extremely cheap medication had excellent efficacy in the treatment and prophylaxis against SARS-CoV-2. And this recent study shows conclusively that natural immunity is superior by far and over a longer period of time to 2 shots. Think about that. So what can we glean from this? One, we already know that the risk of getting more and more boosters of these still experimental drugs, and I say experimental because they never went through the complete and rigorous trials that the Food and Drug Administration would normally do coming on board. But these experimental drugs, the risks of taking them have become more and more known as time has gone on, as we've seen increasing levels of people reporting adverse events from these vaccinations. One study was suggesting it was like 1 in every 800 and something serious and concerning adverse events. Don't quote me on that last. It was very high, and there's been lots of drugs that have been pulled from market when adverse event reporting dipped below like 1 in 10,000. So when you have one in much less, significantly less than 1,000, significant adverse events. That lets you know that something is wrong with those medications. So, as we ramp up for a new round of a slightly different variation of the Omicron variant of SARS-CoV2, and now there's renewed talk about another round of injections. Please join me in rejecting ultimately these new round of injections. One other thing to think about too is that even though natural immunity wanes over time, the fact that your body has responded to a virus previously preps it for response the next time. It's not like your immune system says, okay, we haven't encountered this virus in years, so we're just going to totally forget how to do any kind of response. It doesn't work that way. It's been a while since I've taken anything related to immunology back in the day called school, but it was made very clear to us that your body puts into place mechanisms to help it remember, whether it's been 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, a response or a pattern response to a virus. And now that we've all been exposed to SARS-CoV2, we've all probably had it, even if you've had the shots. Um, our body will be that much more equipped to handle it. And the last thing I'll just say about this, and again, this video is probably going to be pulled from YouTube anyway. Um, it is clear from all of the experts I've read about immune, or I should say, viral infections, is that if a virus is going to stay around, which SARS-CoV-2 has stayed around, if a virus is going to stay around, it has to do two things. One, it has to become easier for that virus to infect a new host. That's one thing. And two, it has to become less virulent, less capable of killing its host. So we've seen this in the variants of SARS-CoV-2. They've diminished in their deadliness quite substantially, and they've become easier to catch. And no amount of vaccination is preventing that. Sorry. So anyway, hope you're doing well. Check out that study. Again, the title is in the title of this video. Remember to like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I never say that, but anyway, I'm saying it now. Take care.